Good morning, everyone. Let's see. Do I have everyone? I was on a call earlier with Commissioner Jones, so I think he jumped off that one with me and is joining this one.
I don't see him or Commissioner Lanier yet.
Okay, I see our city manager. Good morning, Commissioner Moody. Commissioner Rapart, Commissioner Asasi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioner O'Connor. Oh,
Good morning, Madam Mayor.
good morning. It's good to see you. I'm going to pay close attention today, Commissioner. So if you have a question, you just put your hand up. I won't miss you. I promise. Right. Let's see. I'll give one more minute for Commissioner Lanier and Commissioner Jones to join us. And then I think we'll get started.
Mayor, while you're waiting on them, I just want to let the commissioners know if they'll check their emails. They want a hard copy, they'll have to print them from home. We'll make deliveries this morning.
Commissioner Lanier just got on.
Great. Joel, do you see, good morning, Commissioner. Do you see Commissioner Jones?
I do not see him yet.
Let me text him real quick.
Oh, I think he's going to be coming soon because he just accepted my invitation.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Knowing that Commissioner Jones is going to join us momentarily. I know we have a full agenda today. So commissioners, all of you should have received the agenda. Our most important item before us today. All right, I'm going to ask if you're not speaking to go ahead and be on mute just to try to remove some of the background noise. So our most important item today is our budget. So we'll have our budget discussion, hopefully adopt our budget. And then we have a couple other items before us to talk about today together. And then we'll finish up, hopefully within just a couple hours. So I'm going to call this meeting to order, and we'll start with welcoming our interpreter. So we do have Lilibeth Perez. So I'm going to give her a chance to introduce herself because we do have at the end of our meeting today an opportunity for public comment. So if you are watching and you want to provide public comment, you can call into 311 or 456-3000. And you can press number 1 and then number 1, and you'll be put in a queue. But we're not going to have public comment until the very end of our meeting today. So before we get started with the minutes, where I'll ask for a motion to approve our minutes from our last meeting, I'm going to give Ms. Lilibeth Perez an opportunity to let folks know where they can access interpreter services. Lilibeth, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me, Mayor?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Great. Good morning. Thank you, Mayor Bliss. If you need interpretation services, I'll be able to assist. Like Mayor Bliss said, you can call 311 or 456-3000 and choose option 1, and then just choose the option you'd like to speak on at the end. Buenos días. Si necesita servicio de interpretación para dirigirse a la Comisión de la Ciudad, yo estaré disponible para ayudarle. Solo tiene que llamar al 311 o al 456-3000 y elegir la opción 1.
Thank you, Lilibeth. Oh, there you are, Commissioner. I was just going to respond to you.
Mayor, I just want to let you know, we're going to turn on that queue at 9:45. We don't want people sitting there. So the call-in queue will open at 9:45.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, Commissioners. So next that will take us to approval of our minutes from our last City Commission meeting, special meeting on May 12th. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved and supported. Commissioner Jones, we can't hear you, so maybe you can work on your volume. All right, so moved and supported. Any questions or comments? All right, City Clerk, can you call for the vote?
Yep, Commissioner Moody. Here. Commissioner Moody.
Laura.
Oh, there he is. I heard you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jones.
Yeah.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier.
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi
Yes.
and Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, Commissioners, so next we'll move to our agenda items. So first we'll do a review of the preliminary fiscal plan. So what I'd like to do is similar to what we've done in the past is give the city manager an opportunity to work through the presentation and then we can ask questions, have a discussion, and then after we get through the first part is when I'll ask for a resolution. So we'll go to our action items for 2 and 3 and possibly 4 after we go through the presentation. So I'm going to turn this over to our city manager to get us started. I'm going to ask those who are not speaking to stay on mute so that we can try to eliminate as much feedback noise as possible. So City Manager, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. We're pleased today to be at this point where we are presenting the final preliminary budget due to some of the changes that have been made over our almost 1 month journey. This is our 5th work session, and we've had 2 opportunities for the public to engage, both a formal public hearing as well as a town hall meeting that the mayor and I hosted. Before I begin with my comments, you can take the slides off. I don't need any slides this morning. Before I begin with my comments, I want to just say a couple of things and put things in context, and then I'll just turn it right over to CFO. We are in a economic recession, and it's unprecedented, unanticipated, and we're doing our very best to manage all the changes that are going on. And I think we have been very deliberate, very precision-like in our recommendations and analysis, and have not gone to draconian, severe reductions like other governments in the state, as well as around the country, partly because this is a well-managed organization, has been and continues to be. I want to thank our CFO, our budget staff, our performance management office, our equity team, assistant city manager, deputy city manager, all the department directors and financial staff for the work that they have done in very, very challenging circumstances. I have never in my 25-year career prepared a budget under these kind of circumstances before, and hopefully it will never have to do it again. And our staff makes it look very, very simple for the public and others to appreciate, and as they should. That is our job. I want to thank them. I want to thank the frontline workers who are on the front line this morning, but I also want to thank our staff, our financial staff, who are fiscal frontline employees who are working through these very, very difficult circumstances and have probably experienced video conference fatigue from all the meetings that they've had. I also want to thank our HR department and our labor relations office for doing an outstanding job working with all of our labor groups and our workforce, keeping us all pulling in the same direction. The investments that we have before you, that we have made, we continue to make, aligns with our strategic plan. We are doing it very intentionally. We have a roadmap, we have a playbook, we are sticking with it. And with the current state of the economy, there are no easy decisions. Everything is tough. I wish I could add more to the budget, but that is not the state that we're in. That's not the reality that many of our businesses and residents who are in our community are functioning right now. So we are being very, very diligent. We are not overspending to the point in which we are utilizing the reserves early on. What you'll see, as we shared before, our reserves are intended to help us when in some of the out years. This is very unpredictable, and so we don't want to draw down those reserves now. The budget that you'll consider today, the final budget is about $22 million less than our adopted. We proposed $13 million upon the preliminary delivery. We thought we would need to reduce 10. We got some additional information and we reduced the spending by another $9 million. With that, there is about over 200 positions that have either been frozen or temporary positions that have been cut. You'll hear today there will be some additional reductions of some other positions when the court gives their presentation. I want to thank them in advance for their work that they've gone back and listened to the feedback. For those, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people about public safety and police department. I said this from the onset, we're in a pandemic response. We're in a state of emergency, national, state, and I do not intend to do anything that will jeopardize our ability to respond to those emergencies, whether personnel, operationally, or fiscally. So there's a difference between a cut and a freeze. And it's very important we use language. When you hear cut, that means we're never going to be able to use that during the budget year. When you hear freeze, it's not never, freeze is not now. So there's a lot of misperceptions around what is being cut, versus what is being frozen. So there are no community policing resources that are being cut. There are some adjustments that is made, and the police chief will go through that. There have been some restorations from what was some of the reductions. Some of the reductions were due to freezes, and then some were due to the cuts. But I want to assure the community, the resources that were given as part of the $1 million community policing fund were not cut. Most of those were frozen. So the police chief will go through that this morning. The police department also went back to their budget to see what additionally could be restored. And so I'm looking forward to that conversation as well. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit more about the Third Ward Equity Fund. That's another challenging area. I said this from the onset, from the budget delivery, that we are not in economic expansion, we're in contraction. What we're trying to do is do preservation with our general fund, capital fund. We did that. We rolled over additional spending from Third Ward Equity Fund, $232,000. That is good accountability of what was unleft. We're going to talk about creative ways of using additional resources that we have from federal funding today that may augment some of that, but we have no new unrestricted funding to allocate, not in this era where we're making reductions. Again, this is a long-term financial recovery, and we are managing not for fiscal year 21, we are managing for the future of this organization, for the future of our community, for the future of our children. So we need to have the ability to maintain these essential services and support that will help our residents and businesses, the very people who pay the taxes for which our government depends on. I want to thank all the partners who are a part of this work, and I'm going to turn it over to Molly. And Molly, you can pick up wherever you want in the slide presentation.
All right. Thank you, City Manager. Allison, let's go ahead and pull up the slides. Okay, so as we start off today, you saw this slide on Tuesday. This is the updated general fund financial forecast. Again, our policy of unassigned fund balance is 15%, and even with the adjustments we've made since Tuesday, it's still the same picture. So we've done a little bit of realignment within our expenditure. Our expenditures for fiscal year 21, you won't see that here on the graph because overall we land right at the same amount for ending fund balance of 39.5 million. Again, we don't go below that 15% of unassigned fund balance until 2025. So we are, still very measured. It's a strong picture, but again, if you look at that highlighted yellow line, we are dipping into reserves between 22 and 25 in this forecast. This is a wait and see approach. And, again, as we get through fiscal year 21, we'll keep updating this picture and refer back to see how we're performing. And now I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Payne from police to follow up on some of the questions regarding safe community. Go ahead, Chief.
Well, thank you, Molly. And thank you, Mayor, Commission, City Manager, for the opportunity to speak to you today. The slide before you is our previous recommendations of a little over $1 million reduction to our FY 2021 budget. And I'd just like to go over those again to remind everyone what we had originally proposed and give a little clarity for those reasons. First bullet is free civilian police record specialists and record clerks and 13 interns for approximately $400,000. Freeze one sworn sergeant's position. This was previously a grant funded position that was no longer going to be funded through the grant. We transitioned that with our original proposal over to the general fund. That's about $136,000. Changing from non-certified to certified recruit class, reduced training costs with tuition and other personnel factors that average up to about $171,000. Eliminate elusive, that was $75,000, and identify funding sources to replace the general fund for homeless services, that was $25,000. We would continue to redeploy community police specialists as our homeless outreach streets team. And training, including travel costs, leadership institute, and community engagement for a total of $70,750. That got us to our $1.05 million reduction. Next slide, please. I'd like to now go through some of the explanation of why we recommended those cuts or reductions originally. The freezing of the community records specialist and the records clerk, those positions were, along with our subpoena officer, was to be transitioned into civilian employees so we could free up police officers. And then also the 13 intern position. So intended to redeploy 3 police officers within the department and hiring civilian personnel. 2 officers positions were required to fulfill the commitment in last year's budget for a total of 5 community police specialists for the afternoon. Subpoena service officers, we currently do have a civilian working in that capacity. The police records specialist, which was a property room personnel, is currently not filled. Position will be filled as the budget stabilizes. The record clerk and traffic unit position, that position was to review impounds, tickets, accidents, reports, is primarily clerical work. It's currently not filled. That position will be eliminated as GRPD transition to more, as I presented, and I apologize, I have not been able to give the full commission, but I presented to public safety what we're exploring, that we continue to vet the accident support services initiative where civilians would actually take accident reports as opposed to sworn officers. And I will update the commission as we move forward with that and gather more information on that initiative that we're exploring. But due to the police department's commitment to the citizens of Grand Rapids and the commission, officers were redeployed from other areas of the department. And the second shift community policing team was staffed that consists of 5 officers and 1 sergeant. 13 intern positions. We are currently authorized for 40 interns, of which 34 positions are filled. These positions will be frozen by natural attrition. There's college interns have graduated. 5 of the interns have been hired as police officers as part of our Grow Our Own initiatives. This would leave our authorized interns positions at 27. We are and will continue to grow we are and will continue to grow our own initiative with emphasis on diversity of our workforce. Changing from non-certified to certified recruit class, the non-certified process has been successful way of hiring new police officers, but it's very costly and time consuming. We currently, and I'm glad to say that we will have our current 14 recruits starting June 1st at the academy. That will not be eliminated, and we're moving forward with that. The cut to the recruit class is for the summer of 21, where they would have gone through the academy. By the time that they complete that process, our field training process, our in-house process, those recruits would have been recognized in January, February of 2022. We will continue to collaborate with human resources, recruit and hire officers to maintain our authorized strength of 297. We will aggressively recruit from urban areas that are experienced downturns. I have had several discussions and will continue to work with Mr. Davis from our Office of Oversight and Accountability and work toward that goal and come up with strategies of continuing to recruit. And to that end, all our goals will remain for diversification of our workforce. The elimination of the academy from 2021 will reduce the pool of eligible police officer candidates due to the tuition costs. Mayor, I believe you specifically, but others have wondered about our hiring and what the numbers actually look like over. So we've provided from 2017 up to 2000 our current hiring, and as you can see in the top section there is what our numbers of people who have applied for all of our positions since 2017. In the bottom category there, the bottom slide there, if you notice the sponsor group, which is our academy group, is represented in blue, and in black are our certified police officers that we have hired since 2017. As you can see, the academy works. We've been able to diversify and hire at a better rate than we have with our certified classes since 2017. And we recognize that that's important in continuing to diversify our department. We did freeze one sworn position, a sergeant's position that was previously grant funded, as I mentioned earlier. And then the elucid. This is an outside vendor that conducts a community survey on trust and safety in our neighborhood. We will not eliminate community surveys, but we'll do this through citywide community survey process. And we're looking to identify other funding sources for the homeless services for the $25,000. The city commitment to public inebriate center at Meltroner, we're still committed to it, but money will come from other funding sources that we continue to explore. In 2020, total GRPD training budget was $2.3 million. That was what as part of our initial recommendation for reductions, it was recommended that we $1.7 million for FY 2021. That's roughly about a $600,000 reduction that we originally proposed. Additional training reductions that was mentioned for 70,750 was community engagement was recommended, additional costs, and that was travel costs, Leadership Institute, and community engagement training. I want to also point out the community engagement unit was established, I believe, 3 years ago, staffed with 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, and 3 officers. We also have over 55 officers with secondary assignments that are trained as recruiters and engagement specialists. This will not be reduced in this budget year. Those reductions also will not impact our bias training and cultural competency training. We will continue to move forward with that. Travel and training cuts would be outside training for all personnel, not any specific unit. And all mandatory training to maintain licensing and accreditation would continue. As the manager said, this has been some difficult decisions that had to be made and to come up with the savings that was necessary. And since I presented this, we have continued even up until this morning, look at our budget to try and find more adjustments that could be made. But we have made some adjustments. 120,891 additional cuts where we've been able to identify through our operational supplies. What we've been able to do is restore our non-certified police recruit class for 2021 for 10 officers at about $83,000. We've been able to restore our funding for community engagement unit with $38,000. $7,000 was previously reduced from community engagement training, and $31,000 was for support of community events and participation. So we have added back to 2021 Police Academy and restored funding to our community engagement unit. And I want to address something that kind of came up about our crime stats, and just take a minute to show what has occurred during the outbreak of this pandemic. It was relayed that crime is down. The reality is most of our Part 1 crime categories have increased in the city of Grand Rapids during this pandemic. This trend is not acceptable. We have been working with the 3 crime analysts you are previously authorized to evaluate the data, and then we have strategically targeted subjects that are committing these violent acts within our city. The crime analyst value is evidenced by several recent arrests associated with homicides and shootings where we focus on individual subjects without negatively impacting our residents in the area. The GRPD, we are committed to evaluating data, lawfully sharing data, and strategically targeting criminal activity to ensure all the residents of Grand Rapids feel safe and safe at all times. The data analysts and the additional crime analysts that we have employed will be integral in our crime reduction strategies moving forward, and they will remain in the department. And also, as I mentioned, releasing data, other data, not necessarily crime data, to the public as part of our commitment to transparency. The next slide actually just shows some of the gun statistics, which are also illustrate that unfortunately during this pandemic has increased. And I believe we're transitioning to the court.
Yes, we are.
That's correct.
Okay,
Thank you, Chief Payne. And what we'd like to do now is transition into a discussion about court funding and starting with court metrics. So at May 19th, we had a discussion about court metrics. And what we'd like to do is present some preliminary metrics for your review and consideration. So in the last 5 years, case filings, that doesn't talk about complexity of the case, but it does talk about the gross number of cases filed are down 16%. Court revenues are down 9.72% over the last 5 years. Our GOF investment, general fund investment, that would be the transfer to the court, is up 50% over the last 5 years. And actual expenditures, I'll get to budget amendments in a moment, but actual expenditures are up by the court, the overall court budget, up by 2.32% over the last 5 years. And their non-grant full-time equivalent personnel are at really flat. So up, down just a little bit, having to do with part-time and other staffing by just a little bit over 1%, or under 1%. So in terms of budget amendments, there was a question, and over the last 5 years, what we've done in the lower left-hand corner is present the budget amendments that we've done over the last 5 years. So in 2015, actually, there was an amendment of reduction of the transfer of 500,000. Then in 2016, there was a budget amendment of 1.45 million. You can see that 2017, there was no budget amendment required to complete that fiscal year. And then about $500,000 in 2018 and 2019. So that's the current history. And we're working on additional metrics, and we'll be able to present those after we've had a chance to review them further. So what I'd like to do is introduce 61st District Court Administrator Gary Secor to talk about adjustments in the district court fund budget that are now recommended for City Commission consideration as part of the final budget. So, Mr. Secor.
Mr. Secor, if you're talking, we cannot hear you. Please press unmute. Is he, City Clerk Dees, is he on?
He's on. He just, Mr. C, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Thank you.
Yep, okay. Okay, after our last meeting a couple of days ago, we were directed to look at our 2021 budget and identify other areas for reductions. And upon doing that, we've identified, proposed an additional $526,059 in reductions. Those reductions evolved from layoffs of 6.5 full-time employees effective September 1st through the rest of the fiscal year. That results in savings of a little over $400,000. We would intend on proceeding with implementation of the work share program, a continuation from hopefully June into July of the 2021 fiscal year. That would result in an additional $121,500. And this equals a reduction of about 3%, 3.7% from the preliminary fiscal plan, which was introduced at the end of April. We're going to continue to look at pursuing the potential sales of district court facilities, primarily or more pointedly courtrooms and judicial suites at the Kent County Courthouse, as Circuit Court is going to need some additional courtrooms for expansion or addition of judgeships. So that's where they're at. I'd like to make a special note that these deductions do not involve our special programs, our work crew program. It does not involve reductions in our drug sobriety court or community outreach courts, and it still remains intact, our domestic assault response team program. Further, I'd like to say that These reductions represent actually about a little over 13% of our core function teams. In terms of core functions, I identify those staff in primarily the probation department and the clerk's office who are involved in this case initiation and primarily the processing of these cases. When you look at our 87 staff and you look at our core functions, as opposed to, we have 5 staff on work crew. We've got 6 staff with the domestic assault response team. We've got 6 staff at our drug lab. Include our 6 judges and magistrate with the staff include 20 personnel. Our specialty courts have 3 personnel, and our court administration has 3 staff. That represents over 40 plus staff, which leaves actually 44 staff for core operational services, and that's where we'll be reducing staff, these 6.5 staff from. You open to any questions at this point, or are we going to hold them off till later?
Yeah, let's hold the questions, but if you could just clarify for them the number of people impacted by the work share, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Work share involves all staff, including myself and the magistrate, who are the only non-union employees at the court. And the only people that are not involved in the work share would be our 6 judges.
All right, thank you. Oh, thank you, Mr. Secor. Let's continue, please, to Third Ward Equity Fund.
Thank you, City Manager. So in the Third Ward Equity Fund for this year, we had these 5 projects. And just to give you a little update, you can see for each of these projects, when we have done a budget amendment to actually appropriate money for the projects. And for the 5 have had appropriations and are well underway. So in terms of keeping people in their homes, we have 4 projects complete. 2 are pending. We're slowed a little bit because of the COVID pandemic and the stopping of construction activity. And there are another 4 that are in various steps of development. So those 10 together are roughly $124,500 of obligated activity, and we're reviewing more cases now to move the rest of them forward. In terms of seeking safety support, the program has served 27 participants so far, and has been well managed. Lead awareness and education. We've talked about that before. There's a significant program that has been completed, and the Community Development Department has received another grant that we can continue to do some work in later this spring and summer. The business retention incentive program has moved forward. There was a solicitation for participants. Those participants submitted applications. We have reviewed. Southtown Border Improvement Authority has reviewed those applications and is recommending that 9 move forward. And those are now under consideration by the Southtown Corridor Improvement Authority for projects that will invest the $200,000 appropriated for this purpose. The business loan collateralization program, we've had difficulty finding a underwriter, and underwriting partner, and what we're thinking is that we will recommend this for reappropriation in fiscal 21, and we'll use it to support business retention and resiliency. Next slide, please. So moving forward, just covered the first bullet that we recommend that we move forward to use this for business resiliency and also recovery within the Third Ward. And then we have accumulated other resources for business resiliency recovery. And within those resources, what we recommend is that we prioritize $750,000 for investment within the Third Ward, and do that within the residency and recovery framework that we have put together. So this will be recommendations made by the Economic Resiliency and Recovery Work Group, be run through the emergency operations structure, and it will be expended by the end of calendar 20, so by December 31 of this year. Thank you.
Okay. Now let's go back to, you've seen this attachment on Tuesday, slightly adjusted now for the line district court. It's third from the bottom. You'll see that a little over $500,000 adjustment, a reduction in their budget. So we're no longer doing as great of a transfer for the subsidy. And then if we go down to the next slide, you'll see our total budget. Because we've eliminated or we've reduced that budget, you'll see it's a total reduction of close to $8.9 million. So the preliminary budget introduced on April 28th had $539 million proposed. We've reduced it by $8.9 million, leaving us at $530.7 million. 530.7, sorry. And I will send it back to City Manager.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Claren. And again, I want to thank all the staff who has contributed to this fiscal plan. Commissioners, thank you for your patience and your feedback in this process. This plan is sensitive to the economic conditions. It is responsive to the feedback that we heard from both you and members of the public, and it is in line with our strategic plan. So with that, Mayor, I yield the floor back to you for any action questions from the commission.
Great. Thank you, City Manager. And thank you to everyone who presented this information. Appreciate it. I am going to go ahead and let's see. I think I'll open it up to my colleagues to start. So Commissioner O'Connor.
Mayor, let me ask you, just from a process perspective, we want to go section by section with
yes, that's actually a good idea.
Public safety first. Public safety questions first. Okay. Yeah,
let's do that. It's probably easier virtually, so that the chief can respond to the questions, and then Mr. Secor, and then so Commissioner, why don't we take them in sections as the city manager recommended? Let's start with the public safety. I see the chief rejoined us.
Yes.
Thank you again for the presentation. So let's start with that. Commissioner O'Connor, related to who has questions to the public safety recommendation?
Mayor, I think the chief is giving us some feedback. If there's another phone or anything that's on, chief, we need the other device.
Okay, we'll work on it. I'm looking for it.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Hart, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief, for going back to the drawing board. I think that's reflects the department's willingness to do what needs to be done to meet what the community is calling for. I do have one question and maybe one comment. The original reduction for the non-certified class was going to be 171,000. Does that mean that we were planning to offer 20 of those grants? And
no, sir. What was factored into that were other costs that we will pick up. We added $83,000 just for the tuition. That gets us in the door. We'll be able to the other costs through, and some of it was personnel, which already is in our personnel budget, but like uniforms, equipment, different things like that. That was reflected in that total cost of 171. It was kind of a blended pulling from different areas. We will be able to find that additional money on top of the $83,000 in our budget.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And, I do think that with the interns, I appreciate the clarification from the city manager about freeze versus cut. And I do think that, given the Hillard Hines study, that's that's the perfect kind of solution for, efficiency and that kind of thing, and keeping more of the sworn officers on the street. So, hoping that can be a priority as there are budget amendments. And then I do appreciate the crime stats. It is a helpful clarification that crime has actually increased in many areas, even during this time. Certainly those gun stats continue to make it clear that we need to do some sort of a community-led violence prevention program, like Cure Violence. We're on that train. So I do hope that we'll continue to be able to have that conversation in order to curb that. I think that the stats give us the directive there. So thank you again for going back to the drawing board. I know that that's hard. That takes a lot of diligence and going line by line. And I just want to say that I appreciate those adjustments.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Moody?
Yeah, Chief, thank you for the report. I appreciate the changes that have been made as well. However, I have one question that seems to bother me a little bit, and that is your report on police recruitment class.
Hold on, Commissioner Moody. Commissioner Moody, before you do that,
Yes,
Chief
sir.
Payne, please check and see. Do you have any other communication devices that are playing this meeting in your office? They need to be all the way on silent or in another area.
Okay.
Yeah, Chief, thank you.
Thank you,
So
City Manager.
Or close the door. You have to close your door.
we're gonna-
Doors closed. Yeah. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. We did have the television on, and it was on mute, but evidently it wasn't muted enough. So I apologize for that. Hopefully this is better.
All right, so I'm going to turn it back to Commissioner Moody. Commissioner Moody, why don't you start from the top just so that everybody can hear you clearly?
Okay. As I said earlier, thank you for the report, Chief Payne. I, along with Kurt, Commissioner Rappert, I'm in agreement with the changes that have been made, and I'm glad that you went back and did this. My biggest concern is that I'm concerned about your community police recruit class results. I see that the African American percentage is very low, and going toward the future, once we get past this COVID-19 in our budget, what are you going to do as the chief of Grand Rapids to improve African American be engaged in a police class?
Yeah. I think the city managers pointed out we have done well with our gender equity, and we will continue to pursue that. And that is a concern. I have asked our community engagement unit, who's responsible for recruiting, to provide me options that we could explore. I've shared those with Mr. Davis, as I mentioned. Mr. Davis and I are partnering along with our community engagement unit, with some strategies. There's things like incentives, recruiting directly from traditionally or urban area police departments that I think Grand Rapids is a great place to go. We need to get that message out there more than what I guess we've had, because we're not been able to attain the amount of success, even with our non-certified recruit class. I've also looked, and this was a suggestion made to me, that we partner with like the NAACP, the Urban League, to reach out to their counterparts across the country and to try and connect with those communities to see if there's opportunities for us to bring more diversified. So we have been working, we will continue to working, and then your concern is my concern, and I think it's concern of everyone. So we want our police force to look like, to be reflective of what the community that they're serving.
Yeah, and Chief, let me add to your comment, and we need to also double down on our local recruitment efforts. There's the issues of trust. So the image of the police department inside of our city is perhaps more tarnished than the view of the department outside of the city, particularly by people of color. I mean, you have this whole national perception. So we have to figure out ways to build better relationships and have allies from the community to help us, because no one will never see this as an opportunity if members of the community continue to distrust the department and find public fault and blame. Who would, what kid would want to go work for an employer whose parent is so displeased with them as an employer? So we have to find ways to rebuild those bridges. And so the chief mentioned the Mr. Davis, and that is one of the functions of the oversight office, to assist in building those relations. So, Mr. Davis, if you're on the line, can you also elaborate a little bit? Because I know there's a lot of community feedback and concerns about our engagement.
Mr. City Manager and Chief, before Mr. Davis get on, I implore you to build a better relationship with the Grand Rapids Public School System. And that if you're looking for African American males, you have to get into the school systems and show a better attitude toward the students to explain what that police positions are. There are individuals in the community who want to be police officers, but because of what City Manager said a few moments ago, that is the true statement. But these numbers, these percentages frighten me because what I don't want to see is us going back into the 60s with a predominantly white police force with no people of color. We're in the 21st century. We got to do better.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Davis, are you on? We can't see or hear you if you are.
Yeah, I can see Mr. Davis.
Good morning. So in response directly to the question posed by Commissioner Moody, I think Commissioner Moody, your sentiment related to connecting with the public schools is directly on par with some of the things we've been discussing. In order for us to really begin to diversify the department, we need a good pipeline of individuals that are interested in this type of work. We recognize that the destruction in trust or the erosion in trust over the years makes it to the point where people in the Grand Rapids community currently aren't as interested in this field of work, specifically in African American communities or with people of color. So what are we going to do to make those changes? Well, the chief and I have been talking about programming that we can introduce to create that pipeline. But we also know that pipeline is more of a long-term approach, and there's some immediate things that we need to do as well. So from an immediate perspective, one of the things we're going to do is be more intentional about making sure that we are in these communities of color, specifically areas that we know these individuals are in, and making sure that we're having conversation about why law enforcement is a field that they should consider. And we're intentional about education, about how you get into a field like this and what that looks like and what the impact is for your community. And beyond that, then we also are going to look at other communities, recognizing that we need to look in Grand Rapids because as it's been said, it's important to make sure that people understand the culture of Grand Rapids and have a commitment to this community when they enter into law enforcement in this community. But beyond that, we look at other communities as well, particularly communities where there has been layoffs or things of that nature related to COVID-19, and be intentional about looking for good candidates, great candidates who happen to be diverse candidates, and imploring them to consider Grand Rapids. So it's a long range plan, but we have some immediate things we have to look at and some long-term things we need to look at in order to make sure we create real change.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Okay, commissioners, other questions related to the public safety? Commissioner Lanier?
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for coming back to the commission with some adjustments to the budget that was presented earlier in the process. And I just have a few questions. I'll actually start with the topic that we were just talking about. I recall that we had a recruitment effort where it was for women only. and it was targeted for women. And I think DeAndre Jones was the only male that showed up. But anyway, it was great success having such a targeted effort to recruit. And we can see our numbers for women increasing along the way. So I think if we do a targeted approach, like Commissioner Moody is suggesting with, ROTC students in schools, security staff in schools, and in colleges and universities, I think that'll help us with our recruitment classes. I think the other piece is we've consistently turned away people of color from recruitment efforts for our certified officers, as well as the recruitment classes. And somehow those persons of color who were turned away from the city of Grand Rapids were able to land a position in other cities in our state. And we have to have a conversation about why that has happened so frequently. If we're standing by this being a goal of ours, we have to kind of look at those things to see why they were good enough for Kalamazoo, if you will, or the county sheriff's department, but they weren't good enough for the GRPD. And I have a question though, to the presentation, I have a question on slide 8. It has at the top of it, it says exam demographics, and it uses the term minority at the very last line on there. And I'm just curious to know what is being considered as minority in this instance. Like, what categories are you placing in that line item? Is it all of the categories that are above the dark line? The ethnic groups that are above the dark line, or I'm just not following. So if someone can answer that question, and then let me see if I had another one. I do have a question, and it may be in the responses that Molly sent about the interns. And Chief, I think you kind of spoke to that there are more than the number of interns that are being frozen now. I guess my biggest question that I was asking about some of the freezes and cuts is, are we looking to have sworn officers doing some of the work that we just recently, through the recommendations from Lambert, created civilian positions to do? And the goal was to allow a civilian to do the work, so it would free sworn officers to doing only those duties that sworn officers can do. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. Someone can answer that question. And I think that includes the questions that I had about the policing. And let me say this as the first moment of being able to speak. Thank you, City Manager, and the rest of your team for all of the time and energy that you put into even looking at listening to the public comment and looking at your budget again from Tuesday to now, and and all the work that's gone into this in the last 48 hours. I'm personally very appreciative of how much time has gone into this and how thorough it is. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner, and actually I can go back, and it was part of your comments, but we've always had, and related to Commissioner Moody's comments about the schools, we've always had a good relationship with GRPS, and that will continue. I am look forward to an opportunity to meet the new superintendent that's coming on board and have conversations with her about our opportunities that we're already in the schools. I'd like to enhance those opportunities. So those are great points that you bring up. I think GRPS is a good resource along with all the other schools. We will continue to evaluate with our HR department on our selection process. And that is correct. The numbers you were speaking of, if I do the math correct, is reflective of the group above the line.
For that, and let me make sure that I'm clear. As it relates to a partnership with the schools, I'm not necessarily advocating for police officers to be in school buildings. as much as I'm advocating for us to engage with the students who are in ROTC programs, the security officers that work in those schools, in order to build the relationships that Brandon just spoke about, having those relationships built at that level so that then when it's time for them to get to the age in selecting a career, that we would be a career opportunity for those students. I want to
Sure.
make sure that I'm clear with that.
Yes, Commissioner. And like I said, I'm looking forward to a conversation with the new superintendent, see how we can further partner together. That's the point. Thank you for asking the question. And again, HR, we continue to evaluate our hiring process. I welcome it. And part of our hiring process, it just isn't the police department. HR is involved in it. And then Patty and her team are involved in it. So we will continue as part of our city strategic plan. Look at that and how better we can do that.
Commissioner, what I'm going to do is ask the chief, and you don't have to do it now, but perhaps as we get to the end of the question about the statistics, I think above the black line, those are race demographics. Then looks like below the black line on the top bar, those are ethnicity summarized. I think what they've done is put the ethnicity and gender into the minority category. So that's why it may be difficult to reconcile. But I'll ask the chief to go offline to talk to his staff that helped to compile these statistics and then to confirm that later on in our briefing.
Okay.
Thank you, City Manager. And Chief, I am curious, and maybe this is a conversation you can have with Mr. Davis and the City Manager. I appreciated Commissioner Lanier's comments. I think every single one of us have known individuals who applied to work at PD and were not selected, but yet they were hired by county, Kalamazoo, Atlanta. The list goes on, and many of them are folks who are Grand Rapidians and couldn't get hired right here in their own city. So it would be interesting to take a closer look at that and just better understand, why that is.
Sure.
I know it's something that has come up quite frequently over the last several years. So thank you, Commissioner, for bringing that up.
Yes.
Commissioners, other questions? Commissioner Assassi?
Thank you. I don't have much to add outside of what my fellow commissioners have talked about, and I too would look for, in the future, what is that recruitment plan? What can we learn from the past, and how can we be informed? So that definitely your last comments, Commissioner Lanier, I think ring true. So we have the data, and then we have also people's experiences. And we have to understand that one person who, got hired somewhere else and didn't get hired in their own hometown, things like that, it's sort of like, it's not really an urban legend, but it gets shared and it gets shared over and over again. And so from a communication standpoint, I think it's important to know that, we typically listen to people that we trust versus institutions. So I think that needs to be part of those future conversations. So thank you, Chief and Mr. Davis, for sharing your thoughts. I just want to add one. I'll add my thanks as well. I hope everybody gets a little time off tomorrow and rests and enjoys hopefully good weather. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up was something that came up really a couple of fiscal committees ago. And then, Mayor, I know you've been actively involved with the fundraising for the Promise Scholarship. So we did approve funding to do the academy through GVSU. And I'm a proud Laker. I love Grand Valley. I think their programs are amazing. I also think, knowing that we have made an investment as a community in the Promise Scholarship, we need to look at, what kind of offerings that GRCC could have in the future as it relates to academy. I think Captain Collier talked about the instruction time, and that's why Grand Valley was preferable. I think with all the cloud and the dollars that the city of Grand Rapids spends, I'm pretty sure Dr. Pink would pick up the phone and talk to us about what that might look like. And so we know that that's going to be a feeder from our GRPS or other, our other schools into GVS or into GRCC. And then that, I think, is also another feeder into potentially these programs that we're talking about. So I want to make sure that we're connecting all the dots of the things that we're investing in, that we're raising money for. and that have changed over this last year. So that doesn't need a response at this time, unless you'd like to, Chief. There's just more of a thought of how we move forward with the statistics and the hiring. Thank you.
No, thank you. And we continue to have conversation with GRCC, and we do hire from their academies, but how their academy works in Grand Valley, comparing those, hopefully we'll have conversations about how we can have more involvement with GRCC.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Commissioner Sassi. Just a quick update. I'm in weekly fundraising calls for the Promise Zone, and I'm still very hopeful that we'll have all of the dollars raised by August. So that's our goal. But I assure you that the subcommittee of the Promise Zone Authority, we're working hard on raising those dollars right now. So Commissioner Jones, did you have a question? And then I'll go back to Commissioner Lanier.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chief, for your presentation on this morning. I have a couple of questions. The one has to do with, as we were kind of, as the various iterations have come forward with the budget, it is, I'm sure, like for many of us, many of my colleagues, it's caused me at least to take an even deeper look at the budget, line item by line item, to really get a better idea of where cuts could be made. Understanding again that a lot of this, quite a bit of it, is rather complex. But I have a question in particular, Chief, that I don't know if you can. My hope is that you can answer it. If not, maybe you could call on other folks to come about and respond to it. But I know that again, in asking PD to make the cuts and the recommendations that you made, one of the items that I noticed on the budget happened to be line item 800, and this is in the rather thick budget book that we got at the beginning of our budget process, and it is simply entitled Other Services and Charges. It's found on page 306. Other Services and Charges. And what I noticed was in last year's budget, the amount that was adopted was about $9.5 million, and the amount that's being proposed this year is a little bit over $10 million. And that's a difference of about nearly $500,000. And I was just really curious to find out, what is paid for out of that line item, because there's an increase there. And again, your department and others have been asked to make a reduction, and just curious as to what is paid out of that particular line item. Again, that's other services and charges. Rather vague, but line item number 800.
Yes, sir. And I do have my budget people here with me. I did not know that immediate answer, but what I believe that what I've been informed, and maybe Molly or Scott they're on can confirm this, that was due to our body worn cameras. The contract we had with them was ending. So the 500,000, the majority of that was for the entering into a new contract that are associated with the body worn cameras.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. And I would ask our CFO to clarify, because we have that outlay other services and charges in multiple areas of the department. So Ms. Claren, can you give an overview of how that code is used in the different sections of the police department's budget?
Yeah, in that particular page, 306, they're referring to that line 800 right under General Fund Operating, Fund 1010. You'll see it goes from 9.5 million up to a little over 10 million. That the majority of that is, yeah, the Chief was correct. It's the body cameras and the cost of the storage of the data that's collected in association with that. So it's the IT charge associated with having the body camera too. It's a robust program, so it costs money.
Molly, can you also speak to what else is paid out of that? That's a significant amount of money, and just other than the increase for the body cams and the IT. What else is paid for that?
Sure. I believe equipment might be rolled into that. I'm talking to Scott right now offline too. Getting verification from my budget staff, but we can do a breakdown of that as well if that's helpful to just get that back to you.
That would be great.
But, well, Ms. Claire, let's do this because this is our last day. We're not going to send any more emails. Let's just go offline and find out the answer. Then we'll come back later on in the
it's a $10 million. It's a $10 million budget, so we'll pull that and try to give you a general breakdown of what that is. They're working on it right now.
Okay, very good.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Molly, can you add a little clarity also and help us understand why? I mean, we've had a contract for the body cameras for years since we started using them and storage. So why the significant increase just because we're renewing a contract and do we need to go back out and bid or that just seems pretty substantial.
Chief could probably answer to the management of the contracts, but I believe we hold on to the recordings off the body cams for a specific amount of time. Right now, I believe we're only adding to the storage. We probably, I imagine, have to hold on to that data for a certain number of years before we can dispose of it. Chief, do you want to jump in? It's just a growing right now.
Okay, let me say this real quickly. Do not feel the need to continue to answer questions without the specifics at this point.
That's why
if we need to go back and look at it. Just tell them we'll come back and get the answer to them this morning.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Mayor?
Yep, go ahead, Commissioner. I know you said you had a couple questions.
Yep, I also want to, my hope and what I'd like to put out there, put out here right now is, if the budget changes, if we see an increase down the road, in terms of getting funds from the feds or the county or, again, if things change, what I would like to see is the restoration of the civilian positions if the budget changes. I say that because I think it speaks to the commitment that we have of sticking with and abiding by what's of the deployment and staffing study. And if there's an opportunity to get back to that based on the budget, that would be great because that would then obviously, as Commissioner Lanier had mentioned earlier, put those sworn officers back in a position where they can do work that only sworn officers can do. And so it is my hope, and I'm sure I hope my colleagues join me in also hoping that dollars are restored and the budget changes and we can amend some things that we've had to cut. But I would hope that on the top of that list would be, again, the commitment to restore those positions if the budget changes. And the last thing I want to suggest, Chief, is as we continue down the path of really engaging in the complex work of recruiting people of color, in particular African American and Latinx, to the department, I would just ask that you and your team continue to perhaps consider the approach that many other cities are doing throughout the country, and that is really taking a more non-traditional approach and considering non-criminal justice majors, but instead focusing on non-traditional professionals as recruits or graduates who are coming out with a degree in sociology, psychology, and the like. I think that for far too long, what has been the go-to is just to go and focus on the criminal justice majors. And we are seeing other cities throughout this country who are focusing on individuals who are coming out of school with different majors. And maybe they're either underemployed or are forced to go to grad school because there's no opportunity in the job market. And so, to the point that's been made on this morning, we have a stellar police department that I think would benefit even more if we had a department that better reflected the community in which we serve. And we're not going to get it. We're clearly not going to get it by being able to offer, substantially more in pay. And so we have to be able to perhaps use a more strategic lens to draw the talent that we need And I would suggest that that might be part of the answer, is to go after those who historically have not been approached to consider law enforcement as a career. So I just want to leave you with that, and again, would be open to helping any way that I can, because I think that that would make what we have here in Grand Rapids even better, is if we can further diversify the workforce of our police force.
Yes, sir. You bring up a good point. I'll tell you right now, I do have a degree in criminal justice, but I wish I had a business administrative degree in putting this budget together. And that's some of the things that I do encourage people to look at. Seek a degree outside of criminal justice, or at least a minor, or expand your horizons. So you bring up a good point. Anytime I talk to anyone about that, it's good to have we do hire outside of criminal justice. So we're not locked in on CJ degrees, and we encourage people to expand their education beyond criminal justice. So you bring up an excellent point.
Thank you. Commissioner Lanier?
Yes, I did have another question, but I also want to make a point. Commissioner Isasi talked about kind of making sure that we're connecting a lot of the different initiatives that we have going on community-wide. And Mayor, I don't know if you remember, but I think we were doing a work session, and I slipped you a note saying, I wonder if we could, make, as a part of the funding that comes with the Challenge Scholars, if we could, have some type of requirement for these positions that are hard to fill, like teachers and police officers and things like that. So I think good thinking, Commissioner Isasi, very good thinking. Chief, I have a question that I failed to ask earlier. It's on slide 10, and you referenced kind of the school community engagement unit with 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, and 3 officers. And then you talked about the additional 55 officers who have kind of this area as a secondary assignment. I'm curious to know how, with the freezes that have been presented, how will the second shift for community policing be impacted by that? Or will you use the 55 officers who have this as a secondary assignment to backfill where there's a need, to make sure that we don't give up what we just implemented with the second shift community policing, which we all find really important work?
Yeah, good point, Commissioner. We will maintain our second shift community policing specialists. We're committed to doing that. As far as the 55, that is a secondary assignment. So those are people from the detective unit, from patrol, from our special response throughout the department. That's considered a secondary assignment. The community engagement unit, we will maintain those officers in that unit, and they will continue to work in that function.
Thank you. But so it's just 3 officers. So am I missing something? Am I not understanding something?
Yeah, it started out with a lieutenant and a sergeant, and we've added 3 officers over the years. So their primary function is, as I mentioned, the 55, we utilize a great deal for recruitment and to go out and work special events and everything. They're also tasked with our hiring process. They work very closely with it. So our backgrounds that are done. So that unit will be maintained. And
I think I know what I'm doing. I think I've combined community engagement with community policing, and that's
yes.
So. As you started
Totally
speaking,
separate.
it registered for me. This is Lieutenant O'Brien's area that
Yes, ma'am.
she worked so hard with, even the recruitment of the ladies and the other recruitment efforts. Thank you. I got it.
Okay.
Okay, great, Chief. So if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and move on. And if we do get additional information from Ms. Claren, Chief, we'll come back to that.
I think she's ready, Mayor. I think we have the answer.
Okay, great. I'll go to Ms. Claren, and then we'll finish up this section and we'll move on to the courts.
Okay, for that category, the other services and charges, that does contain contractual services, maintenance services, our travel, insurance premiums, the wellness. I'm going to have Scott Sainton pipe in. He's going to say specifically the large ticket items involved in that. And in that is the IT storage in the body cams we talked about before. So Scott, are you? Yep, there he is.
Thank you.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Melanie. I think you really hit it right on the head. That category just really includes a slew of different items, contractual services and maintenance service probably being two of the bigger items. There's insurance costs, transportation charges, vehicle repairs, software maintenance agreements, building charges, fleet charges. It really goes on and on. But I think the chief and Molly really hit it on the head. Probably the largest increase from last year is surrounding IT charges relating to just normal inflationary costs, but also a large amount for data storage costs. Other things that were included in there, I know was, again, Dew Point, FileMaker upgrade charges, K9 charges, crossing guard contract, to name a few. And also that the agreement with Axon for both interview room cameras, in-car audio and video software, different items along those lines. So hopefully that gives you some sense of what's in there, but we can certainly provide a listing accounting for that full amount.
Great. Thank you, Scott. That's really helpful, especially because that's such a significant line item and there's a lot of questions about that. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. All right, commissioners, if you're okay with it, I'm going to go ahead and move on to court so that we can follow up with some questions to Mr. Secor for those of you who have those. So I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. I know Commissioner O'Connor, you had your hand raised earlier related to some questions, so I'll start with you. And let's get Mr. Secor back up.
You hear me now?
Yep. All right, Commissioner O'Connor.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And first, I just want to say thank you to Secor and the court for taking a secondary look at the budget and finding some additional opportunities for some cost savings. I guess my only just one question as it relates to the layoffs. Why you're waiting till September to do that and not making that effective immediately or soon?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Commissioner. And Eric and I and Doug talked about that yesterday. The reasoning for that, as indicated in the proposal, is that we're intending work share to be June and July. We had hoped at least there'll be some startup in July, and we've got a tremendous backload of cases, as I'd indicated Tuesday to you, and I'm hoping to be able to utilize those resources because the majority of those resources are going to be clerk's office division resources to assist with catching up. Realistically, with these cutbacks, we'd be lucky to be able to catch up by the end of the fiscal year in terms of the backlog of cases that we got. So the reason is to utilize those resources to at least assist us with catch up for at least 1 month.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that information.
Thank you. Commissioner Lanier.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Gary, for coming back to the commission with these adjustments to your proposed budget. I just have one question as well. It was noted that there would be layoffs of 6.5 FTE, and I'm just curious: are these indeed layoffs, or are these, or will the FTEs be furloughed? There's a slight difference, and I'm just curious to know.
Well, in terms of the collective bargaining agreement, they're defined as layoffs.
Okay, thank you.
So, yes.
Thank you. So, Mr. Secor, in follow-up to Commissioner O'Connor's question, if the courts aren't allowed to open in June, do you have some short-term additional adjustments that can be made in June to reduce expenditures? I'm just curious if we continue at the rate that we are right now with a reduction in caseloads or things continue to get pushed off till July or August, are there things we can do immediately to cut some of the costs?
Well, Mayor, we're going down to a 3-day work week. That's for the entire staff. And as I indicated Tuesday, the courthouse has not been closed. The courthouse has been open. I intend on opening up June 1st, at least 2 of my 5 windows in terms of being able to accept payments for traffic citations, parking, and also cost and fines. But we will not be opening up for any filings because the civil division is kind of on hold at this point in time. But I had a judges meeting last Friday. We've talked about already expanding and starting to work on our backlog of our criminal caseloads. We were severely restricted by the Supreme Court's initial administrative orders, but the last administrative order permits us to expand our criminal caseload. So we will begin June, no matter what the governor does, to be honest with you, to start increasing our capacity is in terms of processing criminal cases. And we've been able to expand from a technology perspective to accomplish some of that utilizing video technology. So we've almost got all of our judges and staff trained. So once that's completed and the video courtrooms are all up and running, then we are starting to ramp up. That's all I can say. The Supreme Court has indicated that we're to take a 4-phase approach. I intend to submit a local administrative order, hopefully next week, that can be implemented June 1st for phase 1. I hope that answers your question.
Yep, it does. Thank you. All right, commissioners, other questions about the court recommendations and adjustments? All right, seeing none, then we'll move on to, want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. A couple of the commissioners I can't see for some reason. So if you, okay, there we go. All right. So let's move on to the third item, the third ward equity fund. City manager or Eric DeLong, you want to come up? So if we have questions around that.
We're on.
All right, thank you. I'll start with Commissioner Lanier.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. DeLong, for presenting the summary of the Third Ward Equity Fund. Thank you, City Manager, for you and your team for the work that has gone into bringing this information forward today. I'll just kind of go back in time and then bring us to now, and it'll only take a minute or two. I'm no preacher, so it'll be fast. Commissioner Moody and I, back probably even in the summer, and then definitely in the fall, talk with City Manager about increasing the Third Ward Equity Fund to $2 million with the hope of being able to bring a group of organizations, possibly citizens, to the table to talk about how best to spend those dollars. I really won't go into the programs that are in place and kind of how we got to that point really, but what we wanted to do was make sure that we expanded the existing programs and make sure that the community was involved in that. And obviously with COVID, things changed significantly. And as a result, here we are looking at a budget that has significant cuts as opposed to adding any revenue. So I appreciate kind of hearing what has been spent, the work that has been done. I'm curious about the fifth bullet on slide 16. And I know we talked about the business loan collateral and the micro grant and the organization. There was some conflicting information about the organization's capability and its response rate. And I'm not sure how many times we reached out to those organizations, the organization that I'm thinking of. But for me, I think the biggest thing is I want to make sure that whatever program that we have in place, that Commissioner Moody and I know who's assigned to kind of move this work forward. Because as we've been kind of asking for status and updates, we haven't gotten those as regularly as requested. I think the last time we requested was probably in February, but we're getting that today and I'm grateful for that. But I think, part of what we want to do is make sure that the movement is happening with the funds, because we don't want the pool of dollars just to sit there. We want it so that it can make the impact that we're trying to make in the third ward. The other question that I have is, or statement or question that I have is, so I didn't ask the question. So number 5, is it possible for those dollars to almost immediately be rolled into the number 4 program item? So from the business loans to the business retention, so it's more of a grant than it is a loan. We know that we did have significant number of applications for the dollars for the business retention. Commissioner Moody sat on the subcommittee that worked to look at those dollars and to make the recommendation to Southtown the board. And they actually were on the agenda yesterday, but the agenda was quite full, so we didn't get to it. We had just a few minutes and didn't want to rush. So the board voted to postpone it to the next meeting to make those approvals. So the commission will see those sometime in June. I'm curious about that, Eric, is if there's a way to just kind of move that to the other category, since it doesn't appear that we've developed a partnership yet to be able to do the loan portion. Now I'm on the next page on slide 17. And I am very grateful for the work that went into this recommendation to use CDBG dollars to bring funding for the Third Ward Equity Fund. I have a couple questions. If you could first remind me of how much the CDBG pool of dollars are. I think it was either 3 or 4 million. So if someone can refresh my memory on the total amount for that. And then if someone could also help me understand that if dollars are allocated to the Third Ward Equity Fund, and prioritize is an interesting word for me, as opposed to it being allocated. So I want to kind of talk about that too. But if it is allocated to the Third Ward Equity Fund, could the existing programs for the Third Ward Equity Fund continue, or are they restricted through because I know there are a lot of restrictions for the federal dollars. I want to make sure that those dollars would be able to do the existing programs. The other piece that I'm thinking of is the categories that are within the last bullet, excuse me, on slide 17 is pretty robust. And there are a lot of things included in this. And so it would seem to me that it would require more than $750,000. So right now we have organizations that do renters assistance and things like that currently. And they're receiving dollars that are about the same amount to do their work, currently. So to have, and that's just one category among so many that are here with home ownership and technical assistance and some other things. So just curious, if during this short period of time, if you've thought through like how you'd allocate those dollars to be spent from that last bullet.
Yeah, I'm gonna just have some general reactions and I'll share, turn it over to Deputy City Manager DeLong. Some of the money that we have received for the ESG and CDBG COVID have been committed for response. So our commitment to sheltering, the shelters that we're standing up, and those are long-term shelters. And so, as we said from the onset of the budget when we were awarded, it's 2.2 and 1.1 total for a total of 3.3. And we have committed some of those dollars already, and others we have reprogrammed through our economic recovery team, as we have previously briefed on, I think, our second budget work session. The difference in this is not saying members of our businesses, residents of Third Ward would only receiving $750,000. This is ensuring that we will be very targeted in that, plus whatever other eligibility might occur with the other funding that might be available. But this would be very, very, very focused. The other question that you had about the business loan collateralization and microgrant program, as long as that we've not made any commitments and that's still not off the ground and we're still working on it, I see no problem with reallocation and using it as incentive programming like we've done with the other dollars, because those are unrestricted funds. So Mr. DeLong, do you have anything else to add to those comments?
Thank you, City Manager. So I agree with you that reprogramming to the BRIP program is something that could be considered. The idea of the recovery work group was that these dollars could be used for business assistance grants, and maybe spread more broadly. But we're obviously open to what you wish to do with the $232,500 from this current allocation. The way that we could spend the dollars to accomplish what the city manager has said is by using the funds that are allocated between the business recovery and the residential recovery portions of the work group. And so it could be used for rental assistance, could be used for mortgage assistance, could be used to support resident-based organizations that are developing within the third ward, much like we're supporting neighborhood associations. And and also additional business grants. So, and technical assistance. So all that together is how we would intend to direct the dollars into this investment.
So then my next question, because we don't really do annual budgets, we're also projecting into future budgets. I am curious to know then what that would mean for the third ward equity fund, since we're using one-time monies, to allocate dollars for the fund. FY21, what would that mean for 22 and going forward? And that isn't something, city manager, you have to necessarily answer today, but I just want to make sure that it doesn't get missed as we're kind of moving forward.
Well, I want to be transparent because I don't want it to be perceived as not disclosing. This is a one-time allocation, as was the allocation for the general fund, the $750,000. So in our future year assumptions, as you will soon, or as you have seen on a 5-year projection, and that slide was, did we put that in this presentation, Ms. Claren? 5x5?
Yeah,
that was where we started.
Yep. Slide number 4. We are spending down the fund balance in future years. So, and that gets us even below policy level in fiscal year 2025. So there is no add for ongoing expenses beyond fiscal year 21 for the third ward equity. There may be opportunities to reapply, reconsider some of the CDBG funding in the future. But right now, as you were, that money that the commission just approved on our regular CDBG allocation, none of that was allocated for these purposes specifically in the most recent budget. Nor is that reflected in, I think, the Community Development Department's 5-year spending plan.
So, City Manager, let me just add. I'm going to go back to what you originally said, and some of this, the budget we have before us today is in the moment that we're in with some pretty dire projections around revenue because of the recession and because of COVID-19. I anticipate that we will know a whole lot more about revenues in 3 months and 4 months, and we will be doing ongoing budget adjustments throughout this next year. Some of them may be requiring us to take deeper cuts, and some of it we may receive revenues that we weren't expected, that we will be able to come back and revisit items such as this, along with a number of the other items that I know other commissioners wanted to see in this budget that were not able to be in this budget. So again, this isn't perfect. I'm glad to see that the $232,000 are being carried over for the third ward equity fund. And as we look at how the funds that we have right now that we know of, because we just don't know enough about what the next 3 to 6 months holds. But we know that we have the 2.2 million in CDBG funding. That is for target areas with a priority to our neighborhoods of focus and third ward. Those details will continue to be worked out over the next 4 weeks. So again, it's not perfect. I think all of us feel that way. But I think we need to go back to what the city manager originally said, is that we need to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Commissioner Moody?
Yes, I want to thank you, Madam Mayor, for this opportunity And I also want to echo my colleague, Commissioner Lanier, as well. We have been talking about this for quite some time because we are definitely interested in the third ward progressing and moving forward. Seems as though every time the third ward gets some money, something comes up and kind of takes it away. I appreciate the city manager's effort and the staff for putting together the third ward equity fund. My concern right now is that I want to know a little bit more about the history programs. For example, out of that 232,500, we have a partnership with Next Step West Michigan. How is that going? How is that money going to be allocated to them, and how do we know, as a third ward commissioners, how that money is dispersed?
Thanks, Commissioner.
So in terms of the Next Steps program, that's the part I was referring to regarding the.
Yeah, on page 16 at the top, keeping people in their homes.
Yep.
I need a little bit more clarity on what that is and how that is going to be dispersed through Next Step West Michigan.
Yes, so I will do that now. So what we're doing there is this is being run through the Community Development Block Grant Department, Community Development Department. And what it's doing is doing repairs on homes that have significant code issues. And what we're doing is addressing those code issues and improving the homes. And so far we have 4 projects completed. 2 projects have work that is pending due to COVID and the downturn in construction. Those will be restarting now. And we have 4 projects that are in process. So, and of those 10 projects that I just talked about, we spent $124,500 spent or committed. So that leaves $108,000 yet to allocate for, and we're reviewing cases now to move that forward. So we have a contract with Next Steps. It's working very well. They're doing good work, and it's working as the outcome. I think we're producing the outcome everyone envisioned.
Now, on the business retention initiatives, with us getting back into opening up our city, how is that business intensive program from the Economic Development Department going to be beneficial for the businesses within the third ward?
Well, the program, the one that we talked about, the Business Retention Incentives Program, has to do with businesses that are making improvements to their facilities, and the subcommittee that is working on this at the Southtown Corridor Improvement Authority has recommended 9 projects to move forward that I think would allocate the $200,000 that was approved for that investment. But to the point that you made earlier, those 9 projects were selected from a group of 24 applicants that were submitted for review. So there is potentially additional capacity there to use the money that was allocated for the loan collateralization program for business retention improvement program, if that's what we desire to do. And we're happy to explore that to see if those are recommendations we'd like to move forward with. The one thing that the Southtown Corridor Improvement Authority and staff did was they surveyed all the applicants because we took the applications before the COVID pandemic hit and the emergency status started. And so we surveyed the applications and to determine which of them were prepared to proceed even through the pandemic. And so those results were used in getting to the 24 project applications, which turned into the 9 that are currently recommended for moving forward. So I think we have a good data set here, and there could be other viable projects.
I know. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. I'm going to open it up for questions and comments from other commissioners who I haven't heard from yet. Who has questions or comments related to this topic? Commissioner Jones?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to say how much I appreciate the work of City Manager Washington and staff in going back and taking a harder look at this particular item. I think that what we have before us is a real opportunity to lean in like we never have before in a couple of ways. One is clearly to utilize the dollars that are rolling over to go toward the Third World Equity Fund. But to the point that was made, and again, when I want to say that I support your recommendation, City Manager Washington, this idea of tapping into the dollars that we have received by way of CDBG and even our housing fund to be unapologetic in focusing on on areas or on neighborhoods within the third ward. And I think, we talked about this desire clearly that my colleagues in the third ward have of getting that number back to what was originally committed to of $750,000. I think there's an opportunity here to go above and beyond that if done correctly. So the ability to use those dollars from CDBG and also from the housing fund to not just focus on the third world equity fund, but also perhaps to tap into or look at opportunities to aid those with the neighborhoods of focus, which also includes obviously parts of the third ward. I think that there is, if we have that opportunity before us, and we need not do a whole lot of thinking about it. We need to just be very intentional about addressing the needs that are there, in particular, third ward, and again, neighborhoods of focus, because as we know, this pandemic is most adversely affecting the African American and Latinx communities in our city and county. And so, what better way to respond to it than to use the resources that we received, and to do so with the understanding that, again, if you look at it through a lens of optimism, if, as I said earlier with PD, if we have improvements down the line with our budget, with access to more funding, it would be great to see dollars restored for the equity fund, along with, again, a greater focus or more of a focus also on neighborhoods, on the neighborhoods of focus. I said it from the beginning of this process. We never, from here on in, we should never, ever consider putting away an equity lens in everything that we do. And so every dollar that we spend and how we go about spending it, we need to be using an equity lens. And because if we're saying that we're committed to it, we got to walk that thing. And so here before us is that opportunity. And instead of walk, we can run to the opportunity. And again, use those dollars and use them in a way that better positions those who have been historically marginalized to not be injured any further. Because everyone on this call knows what's happening in our communities. And I got news for you. It's transcending. So it's tapping into first, second, and third ward. It's tapping into areas where you have folks who are concentrated who happen to be African American and Latinx. And so it's there. And I would just like to, give you, City Manager Washington, and your staff just full authority to go, man. Go and do all that we can with the resources that we do have to meet the needs and to position our communities who have been injured to come out of this pandemic better, so that we won't, further, so those communities will not further be eroded by the pandemic. And there's already catch up that's at play right now for the African American Latinx communities in Grand Rapids. And we don't want to have it to where they're even farther behind. So from the words of somebody older and probably from another country, go ye therefore, would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know I have said this to city staff, and I'll remind all of us that our work related to the budget doesn't end with the budget that we adopt today. We have a lot of work going forward. As I said, there's still a lot of unknowns, and I anticipate we're going to be working on the budget all year long as we get new information. After we pass this budget, hopefully today, I see two significant issues for us to take on as we go into June and July. And one of them will be just this, it'll be around recovery. So a lot of decisions are yet to be made, and we have some work to do, and this is going to continue to be a topic. And just as you said, Commissioner Jones, we're going to have to be very intentional as we move forward. And then the other issue that we have a lot of work to do on is around recreational marijuana. So I want to make sure that if anyone is watching, you know that today the bulk of our conversation is around the budget, but we know that there are still critical issues that we're working on right now and that will continue after this day that we'll be working on together. So thank you, Commissioner Jones, for highlighting that. Any other comments before I turn it back to the city manager? Commissioner Asasi? Oh, can't hear you, Commissioner.
Sorry, I was double muted.
There you go.
When I'm refilling my coffee. I think one of the important things to go back to when I looked at the slides around the Third Ward Equity Fund was really around number 2, the seeking safety supports and services. So I think just alone yesterday, I talked to a number of people who were just dealing with a lot, anxiety, probably some undiagnosed depression. And so I think that's something that I want to continue to lift up in our community, and particularly in the Third Ward. And I think I just think about the number of people who need those services right now, and I will continue to want to go back to our GRPD as we talk about this as a fluid opportunity. We've seen some communities that have, really put investment, taking away from things that were criminalizing juveniles into more supportive mental health services. So that's something that I would, Brandon, you're, a week into your new role, working with the police department, working with the chief, but that is one area that I want to lift up that I think just doesn't get talked about enough. And I would hope that our partners at the county, as we await sort of those communications and see what happens in these next waves of legislation. But I'm particularly concerned about the mental health of Black and Brown people in our community. And we need to continue to do more in that space. I think we're dealing with trauma on top of trauma. And that's the one thing that definitely keeps me up, especially as I talk to people who are just reaching out. Some people are reaching out frustrated that their unemployment claim isn't going through. They're frustrated because, they're just socially isolated. So I think that's an important topic to continue as we focus on our recovery efforts, but in particular as it relates to the Third Ward Equity Fund. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Repart or Commissioner O'Connor, do you want to weigh in on this before I turn it back to the city manager?
No, I think that Commissioner Lanier is asking the right appropriate questions, and I think that there's time to work out what those look like. But I do think that we've got a great opportunity, like Commissioner Jones said, to pour some resources in some really important places. So I just affirm Commissioner Lanier's advocacy for her, for there to be some sort of certainty around investment from those CDBG funds in the Third Ward, but also Commissioner Jones's that the neighborhoods of focus, some of the places in the First Ward, we can really give that extra support to during this time. So that's all.
Yeah, thank you. I think the city manager is hearing that directive loud and clear. Commissioner O'Connor?
Yeah, it's, as I've said before, was that when it related to other things in this budget, the capital budget especially, I think it's not so much about dividing this up among wards, but about helping people. And the neighborhoods of focus is certainly, as we saw by the data, there's a significant number of neighborhoods of focus in the First Ward. And so I don't want the African-American and Latinx crowd folks in our ward to be left behind because we're basing decisions based on arbitrary lines.
All right, thank you. All right, city manager, you want to follow up on this before I move us along? I know that we wanted to make sure that we open it up for public comment as well. So we still have a couple more items on our agenda today. So do you want to follow up and respond to any of the questions or comments?
No, Mayor, I think you all have covered everything very exhaustively, and the staff has. I have no other responses. I'm looking forward to your decision regarding the budget we have put before you.
Great, thanks. And I will trust you and Deputy City Manager Eric DeLong to follow up with Commissioner Moody and Commissioner Linean about potential adjustments to the current funds we have, and if those can be shifted to the business retention, as well as just making sure that there's regular updates on funds from the other funds.
Well, we've had a little transition, and since that one's related specifically to businesses and economic development, now that we have a new economic development director, Mr. Jeremiah Gracia, we can make sure he gets involved in ensuring the continuity of the delivery of that program as he transitions with Mr. Klooster.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you. All right, commissioners, if you're okay, then I'd like to move on. And of course, we can have additional conversation, but I'd like to move on to our second item, and that is a resolution establishing the 2020 property tax millage rate. So if I can get a motion for that.
So move.
All right, moved and supported by Commissioner Jones. Commissioner, so this is the property tax millage rate. We did have a public hearing related to this. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll turn to our city clerk to call for the vote.
Yes. Commissioner Moody.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier.
Yes.
Commissioner Isasi.
Yes.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution adopting our fiscal year 2021 city budget. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Support.
All right, moved by Commissioner O'Connor, supported by Commissioner Jones. So commissioners, I know we've had lots of conversations about this for the last month, including our discussion this morning. I should have counted. I think this might be my 15th city budget. But I'll go back to my days as commissioner when Mayor Hartwell sat in this seat. And as he often said, our city budget is never perfect. Of course, we all want certain things in a budget, and we don't always get everything we want, that it's a process of compromise, and we do our best to make sure that our budget represents the values of this organization. And so even though we're not all happy maybe with every element of the budget, this is an overall multi-million-dollar budget for the city. I can say from my experience going through this budget, I give a lot of credit to our city manager and our team. I think this is one of the budgets that I've experienced where our strategic plan and our values as an organization are closely aligned with the budget. A lot of time went into our strategic planning process last year. I know Commissioner Jones and several of you have brought up even today our commitment to equity, and I have seen that more in this budget than I probably have in the entire time I've been sitting around this table. So for that, I want to say thank you to our city manager and the entire team for the hard work that went into this. And then I agree with Commissioner Lanier. People have been working overtime to respond as quickly as possible to the questions that we pose and getting us additional detail to the questions. I want to thank everyone who has done that even in the last 48 hours so that we can go into today's vote feeling that we have the information and the detail we need to cast our vote. So I'll open it up for other questions and comments related to the resolution to adopt our budget. All right, seeing none, I will turn to our city clerk for the vote.
Commissioner Isasi.
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
My answer is yes.
Commissioner Moody.
Yes.
And for the 15th time, Mayor Bliss.
Yes, It passes. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, City Manager. All right, next that will take us to item number 4. This is a discussion and a possible action, if we so choose to do that today, on passing a resolution that would authorize COVID-19 recovery as a special event to take place within the city of Grand Rapids from June 1st, November 5th of this year.
So move.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, well, we can do a motion to put it on the table, and then we can decide if we want to vote on this. So Commissioner Jones, did you want to make a motion?
I'll move it.
Do you have support?
Support.
All right,
Support.
moved and supported. All right, City Manager, you want to start? And then I see Mr. Canfield is here as well.
Well, yeah, just real briefly, Mayor, we briefed on Tuesday during our COVID update. This is a recommendation that is coming out of the EOC, given the emergency circumstances and the need for social distancing. And we wanted to do so in anticipation that we may not meet before there's additional reprieve from the governor's executive order. So what you have before you is a detailed explanation and resolution of what the staff has visually proposed on Tuesday. And Mr. Canfield can very quickly outline for you any updates that may have occurred since Tuesday. And I know that many of you have only received this as of yesterday. So Mr. Canfield.
Great, thank you.
All right, I will be brief. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners, and thank you, City Manager Washington. As City Manager noted, this is related to the presentation I offered at the beginning of the Committee of the Whole meeting on Tuesday. I noted we have an outdoor space activation working group that includes city and DGRI and other organization representation working under the umbrella of the Economic Recovery and Resiliency Work Group that is part of the EOC. Our goal is to activate a significant amount of outdoor space for outdoor seating, particularly for restaurants and bars. The customers of those types of businesses. I noted we have 2 tracks. We have the authority to permit single business temporary uses on their own property. And this resolution would enable the other track I mentioned, which is the multi-business social zone in city right-of-way or on city-owned property. So the city manager wanted us to work on this very quickly. So we've worked on it with our partners and he wanted us to expedite, and here we are a couple days later with this proposal for your consideration. At a high level, the resolution would authorize a special event between June 1 and November 30. The entire city would be the general extent of the event, but the specific activities within social zones would be subject to a social zone permit, which would be a type of special event permit, and that would be done by zone. We would maintain pedestrian and emergency vehicle access to adjacent properties, require things like sanitation and physical distancing practices, do things to minimize impact on surrounding neighborhoods from signage, lighting, etc. Consumption of alcohol within a designated social zone would be permitted, but of course that would be subject to the other requirements of the Michigan Liquor Control Commission. We expect most of the applications for social zone permits will come from coordinating organizations, so not from one business at a time, but from an organization representing multiple businesses that would benefit from the zone. And we would work with those organizations to ensure engagement with neighboring businesses and property owners and to reach agreement on acceptable plans. So that's the proposal in brief. I want to note that we're trying to be nimble and move quickly and do our best for the business community. We think this is a good framework and we think it will work, but we have the flexibility. If we get started and we find something could be a bit better, we can adjust. So we want to have that attitude of let's get started as quickly as we can, and if we need to tweak something, we will.
Thanks, Mr. Canfield. So, Commissioner, similar to last time, our hope is to really streamline a process that enables our businesses and business districts to be able to utilize outside spaces, knowing that space is going to be critical to creating safe and smart spaces for businesses as they reopen. Lots of moving parts right now, knowing that we haven't been getting a significant leadway as the governor makes decisions. We want to be prepared as soon as we see some green lights. So again, this just puts the framework in place. But as Mr. Canfield said, we'll be looking, actually, all of us will be working with our quarter improvement districts. All of you sit around those tables. This will be a tool that the quarter improvement districts will be able to utilize, that you will be able to work with your businesses that you represent in your wards to determine if this is an option for them as they think about how they reopen and how they get their business at least back to a place where they are able to make enough revenue to cover their costs. So I'll open it up. First, I want to say thank you to the team that's been working on it. And as I said, and as Mr. Canfield said, we're probably going to have to, pivot a little bit as we learn. We are learning as we go in many respects during COVID-19, and we likely will need to do that based on feedback from all of you and the businesses. But this resolution, if we pass it today, would at least give us an opportunity to start working on that. So I'll open it up for questions. Commissioner O'Connor, did you have your hand up?
Yes, Mayor. Thank you. And I'm just really appreciative of the administration and staff for their fast, and then we'll work to make this happen. I've talked to a lot of folks in Grand Rapids who feel that this package, along with hopeful state legislation we've been working on with our partners at DGRI, will give real opportunity for a lot of businesses in Grand Rapids to be successful through the coming months. And I think there's going to be great reception from the public as well to be able to get back to visiting some of their favorite establishments.
Thanks. Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Along these lines, I'm wondering, this question is for City Manager Washington. Have we been pretty active in asking state and federal funders to grant us permission to reimagine how funds are used? I know that, for example, whether it's the CIA or other funds that come from the federal and the state level that have specific parameters. Are we pretty aggressive in asking, hey, can we, because of the pandemic, can we use these funds differently?
I will use your words. My answer is yes. We have, even with our CDBG funding, both with the COVID-related ESG and as well as talking about how the various authorities could help, and we've seen the DDA take action in doing that, but as well as in our request for some of the CARES funding, I guess our sub-allocation of that request to the county, we have anticipated in some pretty out of the box uses in that effort. So if there are other areas that we should be considering, we're open to doing that, but we have been considering all of the various funding areas and trying to be as creative as possible using them.
Thank you, City Manager. Commissioner Lanier?
Thanks, Lou, for presenting this information. I think it's great to lower the barriers for businesses to reopen. I asked earlier in the week about the price tag associated with this. I know some of it is removing fees and, not charging for closing streets and things of that nature, but is there a dollar amount that would be associated with this that the city would be contributing? I haven't heard that yet.
So we talked about the budget for our intent, again, as I previously alluded to in response to Commissioner Jones' question. If we could get funding, CARES funding specifically used for COVID, this is, in our opinion, an eligible COVID-related activity. And so that would allow us to buy additional or do additional things for infrastructure, maybe more, not permanent, but more stable outdoor furniture in certain areas throughout the city. But We also considered other sources, but in this proposal, right now, we're not coming to you with a funding request for this. Once we do, anything that's over my authority would require the commission to consider, and we will be working with all the authorities and coming up with social district plans and things that we can use for events. Mr. DeLong, did you have anything else to add to that?
Well, that's part of the city manager's right. This is part of the investment in resiliency and recovery for businesses. So as we look to activate districts, there'll be this is one potential source for taking care of things such as traffic control and barricade, which can be a significant cost. So we're on it, and we'll be able to finance it.
And there may be other things like waivers of fees that we discussed before that we may be considering as our contribution as well.
But at this point, there is
Or
no
reduction
dollar.
of fees, I should say, reduction of fees.
Sure. So at this point, there's no dollar amount. You don't have a dollar amount yet because you're still flushing out kind of what it will look like. And then you'll go after CARES dollars possibly, and then find funding with the CIAs and other sources to be able to fund it.
That's correct. Now there's a potential, as we said earlier, we have allocated funding in our recovery strategy, but we have not specifically designated any of that to be used for public accommodating of these social districts yet. So as we develop the plans, we may come back to the commission asking for your authorization to approve spending for related for those related causes.
Oh, okay, but let me be very clear, City Manager. What's before us today has nothing to do with budget. This is the policy that would allow for the application. So I just don't. I think Commissioner Lanier's question is a good one, and I don't want to confuse the issue that's before us today.
That is correct.
Thank you. And Commissioner Lanier, I think you raised a very good point, and I am hopeful that as we look at ways that we can partner with the county to support our small businesses, that the county will also come to the table to help our small businesses acquire the PPE they need in order to start to open safely. So the masks and the hand sanitizer and the cleansers, the temperature check, the forehead temp checks. So we are in conversations right now with the county and asking them to do everything they can with the funds they have available to support our small businesses to open safely. So as we hear more, they're still in that process and talking about how they're going to do that. So as soon as we know more, we will make sure the full commission is aware of that. So, but it truly is going to take a joint collaborative effort as we look at the public health and safety, as well as what we can do around infrastructure to create spaces for our businesses. So great question. Commissioner Asasi?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a few questions around this as well. My question, I think when we talked the other day, was around the fire department and just some of the logistics associated with that. So if that's part of the secondary phase of pieces that we'll see, I just want to make sure that we are supporting our local businesses, but also keeping people safe. I think when we think about larger events and just accessibility that might be different associated with some streets being closed, that would be important to know. I'm fine if that's not fleshed out. The second question is around, and specifically in the detail in the agenda, talks about bars and restaurants. But I think so I also wanted to see, is the intention, other things that our CIAs might do together. I'm thinking about things like, the after dark parties that were planned and pushed out. So I'm assuming that's part of this, but I wanted to clarify that. And then I think just as a reminder, as we move forward, again, I want to say, how can we connect the other things that we're involved with? So the Kent County, I can't remember the fancy name. It wasn't a fancy name, but the Kent County Back to Work Safely. Some of the employers that I work with in my day job, these are difficult times. So I want to go and enjoy my local places. I also recognize that some people have challenges of getting to work. Maybe that their childcare isn't fleshed out, and making sure people have the appropriate PPE. So I want to highlight that as we work with local businesses, things that we have signed on, how do we make sure we're lifting that up? And I also think this might be an opportunity, as this gets fleshed out, to talk about the proposals around our local purchasing, and just making sure that continues to be a conversation. I think many of our local businesses, do that very well. But again, how can we tie the different investments and things that are important to us as we work, across the business community? So a couple of thoughts and maybe one question.
Yeah, those are good feedback. City Manager?
Yeah, those are all good questions. I'll start with the first. So on the safety side, our intent is to, as we get the permitted request for use, whether it's a social district or the special events, those are reviews by the various departments to include the fire department will occur. And so they will be able to opine on whether or not there are some safety concerns that would prevent the permit moving forward. So that will be part of the review process. And yes, the special events, and I'll let Mr. DeLong or Canfield weigh in. The same special events process we would use for closure of those after dark process will be, it will be a similar process for review and occurrence for those activities as well. Is that correct, Mr. Canfield?
Yes, and I would note that the resolution actually 5. So it's 5. Let's see, 5N provides for social zones not being exclusive users of those spaces. So the city reserves the right to permit other special events that occur in whole or in part within those same spaces. So we're not trying to lock up these spaces indefinitely for just seating. Other types of things would be able to happen too.
And we want to not only allow other things to happen, but as we review it, we want to make sure we don't prevent other things from occurring as well.
And City Manager, I would add that special events is part of the Economic Resiliency and Recovery Work Group, and the activation is part of the process that we're envisioning for recovery. And so they'll be engaged, and so Mr. Canfield's answer is spot on. They're not exclusive, and you may have a special event happen within a social district or around a social district.
And Mayor and Commissioners, I do want to say that this is going to be, we're going to convenience, we're doing this to convenience our local businesses, but it may come at some expense of the inconveniences. So I don't want you to think you won't hear complaints about noise, or you won't hear complaints about traffic or parking, but those are good complaints to have at this one. Those are reactivation pains. Those are things that we want to get back to, and this is a way to help us ease into the normalcy. And so we're going to have to work through those. We've not done this before, and so we will try to keep you as informed as possible as we progress.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Commissioners, any final questions or comments about this? All right, so there's a motion on the table, so I will go ahead and ask the city clerk to call the vote.
Commissioner Moody.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connor.
Yes.
Commissioner Repart.
Yes.
Commissioner Lanier.
You're on mute, Commissioner.
Are you getting ready?
I'm sorry.
Are you getting ready to sing for us again?
No.
Don't encourage her, Mayor.
Sorry, Commissioner Lanier, what was your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. I heard a note to your singing, so I wanted to make sure that was clear. And then Mayor Bliss.
Yes, it carries. All right, thank you, Commissioner.
I didn't vote.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Isasi, I'm sorry.
This is my first budget, and you're going to deny me another vote on something else, say, Joel? Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we will ask the city manager and the team to just provide us electronic updates as they flush this out some more. And I know that our new economic development director, Mr. Gracia, and the team will be working really closely with our quarter improvement district. So you will also get updates through that avenue as well. All right, so commissioners, the last item before us is a resolution about changing our commission meeting. I'm actually going to ask that this be pulled. So initially we had talked about maybe moving it up to June 9th to create a little bit of a break in June and July meetings. And then there was, from city staff, it was determined that we have too many critical issues on the agenda in June to do back-to-back meetings. So then an idea was to push it back a week, but that would actually even break up our break even more. And so I recommend that we just keep the schedule as is and meet on June 16th. I would also like to, under the executive order that the governor passed, we continue to meet electronically June 30th. So at this point, I would like to plan our June meetings electronically, and we can determine if the June 16th meeting, if we need to adjust the times or not based on how many items we have on the agenda. But at this point, I would just like to leave it as is if you all are okay with that.
So Mayor, staff would like to withdraw that item from consideration. Request the item be withdrawn from consideration.
Okay.
And the other point that you made, Mayor, is we will try to get as much done on June the 2nd and have our regular committee meetings in the morning and activities in the afternoon. We were attempting to try to move all of the committee meetings to the afternoon because I've talked to some commissioners and they've asked for us to attempt that with like a 1 o'clock start. And we've run into logistical problems, and the city clerk can explain some of those logistical problems of doing that. But for the 16th, as you said, if we are able to do much of our business on the 2nd, we perhaps may only need a night meeting for the 16th. And so I think the staff would appreciate, as well as you, if we did not have to meet that full day. So City Clerk, do you want to just explain the challenges that we run into if we did instead of an 8 o'clock start, a 1 o'clock start, even on the 2nd?
Yeah, the issue comes in with what my staff needs to do from when cow is finished to what happens till we get to prepare for the 7 o'clock meeting and working with staff times and to get you your information you need before the 7 o'clock meeting. So, for example, when we had the meeting 2 days ago, just when cow ended, and for my staff to it's like almost 4 o'clock before we have everything to go together. So if we finish cow at like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, there's not time enough to change all that, because even when things are unanimous, there's just work that has to be done behind the scenes to build that from all the things that happened in those subcommittee meetings. And I think this stems out back from when we went from weekly meetings to by month, twice a month meetings. And that's why this system was put together to accommodate that. So I had very long discussions with staff that takes care of that. And their recommendation is they wouldn't be able to officially do what they need to do.
Okay, so just plan on meeting as regularly planned on the June 2nd and June 16th dates. And if there are adjustments to times that we can make based on the items before us, we will do that. And we'll make sure that everyone is notified ahead of time as well as the public. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to see if we have anyone in the queue who wishes to be heard for public comment, and then I'll turn to my colleagues for final comments before we close tonight. So
yeah, just so you know, commissioners in the public, and I'm kind of stalling here so people can get into there. So I'll let you you can do your telethon voice if you want on how to call in.
All right, so if you are watching this and you want to provide public comment, we'll give you an opportunity to call in right now. The number is 311, and then you just hit press number 1 when you call in, and you'll be put in a queue.
So we didn't, just so the commission knows, we didn't have that queue open since 9 o'clock. I didn't want people sitting on hold for 2 hours. We opened it up just slightly before 11 o'clock. So I'll turn it over to Daniel.
All right, Daniel, do we have anyone in the queue?
This is much easier than Tuesday, Mayor. There's no one in the queue.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Daniel. So I'm going to close that opportunity for public comment, and I'm going to turn to my colleagues, and I will start with Commissioner O'Connor.
No comment, Mayor.
All right, Commissioner Jones?
A hearty thank you again to City Manager Washington and the entire staff that worked on the budget. I give you permission to go and pop a cork of the beverage of your choice.
That would be a LaCroix for you, City Manager. All right, how about Commissioner Lanier?
I'd just like to thank the public, although, excuse me, we haven't received any calls today. Just grateful that we had people engaged during the public hearing and a number of people in emails and using other methods to communicate their actual, I think pleasure with the budget during this crisis. And obviously sharing areas where they would, advocate for change and did that respectfully. And I'm grateful that we've had that level of engagement because it says a lot about the work that we're doing, how important it is, and that we have an engaged community that is paying attention. So thank you to the community, and thanks again to Manager Washington and his fabulous team for all of the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this budget process and getting us to this point.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks to the staff, to the city manager. This process was smooth. We got answers to our questions. The updates were understandable, and all of that is greatly appreciated. To Ms. Claren, her first big budget as CFO, hearty thanks to her as well. And I'm just really grateful for all the work of everybody on the team.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Moody? Oh, Commissioner Moody, you're on mute. Why don't you? There you go.
I got a lot of interference going on over here. I think Joel's putting me on mute on purpose. But want to say to the city manager, thank you for your staff and all the hard work that you guys put into this budget. I know that it's been a long hours put into this, and I appreciate all the work that has been done. I think the community also has some real concerns in terms of what's going to happen with COVID-19 in place. I just want to thank you, and you also, Madam Mayor, for your time that you put in working with the city manager and all of the committee. Good work. Let's continue to move forward, and I'd like to get more committee meetings privately with the police chief. I got some concerns about the department right now.
Thank you, Commissioner Moody. And Commissioner Asasi, her first budget. I'll let you finish up our comments today. Commission.
Well, I'm toasting with good old-fashioned Grand Rapids drinking water. So, sorry, Commissioner Jones or Mark. When I get offered other things to drink at City Hall, I'm like, we need to be drinking our water every single meeting. So, thank you. Y'all supposed to laugh. Thank you for this process being, smooth. I think when we think about a process being smooth, we're talking about the dollars that have been entrusted to us to make difficult decisions. And so I hope that everybody knows our follow-up, somewhat might feel like the last minute questions. Those are all done with, I think the responsibility that has been placed on our shoulders that we decided to do when we all decided to run is to make sure we're ensuring not only, the health and safety of our community, but also ensuring our financial future, which I think, we're in this spot today. So I'm very grateful for people to really focus on the process and making sure that I think, next year and the year before, or the year after will be these continued questions to make sure where are these dollars going? What can we do differently? And, what will, municipal government look like in the future post-COVID? I also just want to extend my thanks to, I would say, the administrative staff of the city. I know that All of you are working very hard to support, the department leaders, executive staff. So I just want to say thank you. And April was Administrative Professionals Month, I think on the 28th. And that's been on my heart, just to thank those individuals, because many of you work really hard to get our questions to different leaders. And then just lastly, to the public, thank you for engaging. This takes multiple bodies of city staff and leaders, of all of us in elected roles, but also the public, to make sure they're engaging. So thank you for your engagement via the calls. If you have any trouble with the calls, I had one person tell me that we still want to hear your comment. Don't give up. And the emails and messages that I received. I also hope that engagement continues as we go into the summer, so our work doesn't end. Obviously, this was a big lift, but continue to engage with us, because we are already then now going to be in this next process for next year's budget. Like, that starts today, right? So we have to remember that as well. And then lastly, I just want to remind people, as we look forward to our community, sort of opening up a little bit, I just want to remind everyone to be sure to follow those safety practices for ourselves. I think we can get a little, it feels like things are getting a little bit better, but I have continued to hear of people passing away in our city. And we have to remain vigilant and keep on doing the necessary steps to protect ourselves, the people who are working on the front lines, and our families. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. That's a really important reminder. City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the commission again for your support and deliberation. Thank you for being supportive of the staff and the budget. I want to thank the staff. Again, I said earlier, those who are on the front line for COVID, but we have a lot of people who are on the fiscal back line, if you will. And my hats off and appreciation to our CFO, Ms. Claren. I'm so proud of her and the way she and her team have stepped up and performed, as well as our performance management office, Ms. Sutter, and our equity office, Ms. Stout, have done just a tremendous job in providing some support to this process. And my two senior executives in my office, Mr. Eric DeLong and Doug Matthews, thank you for your support and follow through. There are a lot of meetings that occur behind the scenes, obviously, which I cannot be part of all of them, and they do a tremendous job of providing representation for our office and input or leadership from our office on these matters. And so thank you. Thank you to all the department directors and the staff and the fiscal liaisons in each department for your work. And most importantly, again, to the community. That this is what public policy is about. It is not top-down command and control. It is a mutual network with the elected leaders, staff, as well as the public, holding us all accountable. And so we appreciate the feedback. I think my staff would appreciate even more if we had a video conference holiday, and no online holidays. Unfortunately, we have to meet every day for the EOC, but we will do our best to give them some reprieve. We have a lot of people who now have to get the budget loaded for implementation, and so there's a lot of work that goes on there, as well as just step away. People have been sitting down looking at screens, as you can appreciate, as you all have, daily for long periods of time. And so we need a pause from some of this routine that we have gotten in, so we don't get COVID fatigue. And so I want to thank everybody, and I look forward to not only the approval of the budget, but the implementation. And you will hear nothing will change. We'll come back if we're permitted in November to have our planning, and back in February for our mid-year update on performance. So none of that changes. We want to be accountable to the things that you've entrusted us with. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, City Manager. And
Mayor, we didn't, I don't think everyone heard your comment, Mayor. Can you repeat?
All right. Thank you. Sorry, I lost you for a moment there. So I'll end as we adjourn here by adding a few thanks. One, I want to thank our city clerk for all the work in helping get these virtual meetings in place. Again, thanks to the city manager and the whole team in putting this budget together. We all know that this budget that we passed today was not the budget that we all envisioned 8 weeks ago. And all of us had to take a deep breath and know that we had to put some of our priorities aside as we not just get through COVID-19, but this recession that we're experiencing. And as we look to the future, trying to figure out what that looks like. I can tell you, I can't imagine doing this work with any other group besides all of you. You're just an incredible group of dedicated public servants with huge hearts. And I know you are all working overtime as well in your communities and neighborhoods and wards as we all work together to get through this. So I want to say thank you for your hard work and dedication and all the hours that you've put in during this budget process as well. And then as we end today and as we enter the holiday weekend and Memorial Day, I just want to encourage everyone to take time. It's going to look different this year as we honor those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country, but let's make sure that we do that as a community as we go into Memorial Day, that we pause and thank everyone, not just who have served our country and continue to serve, but those who really truly gave the ultimate sacrifice. So enjoy this weekend. I hope you get a reprieve, but I hope you also take some time to honor those who have served our country. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you, everyone.